This reading is from Rays of the One Light by Swami Kriyanandaji, based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. The following readings are from the Bible and the Bhagavad Gita. Each week we read from both scriptures as prescribed by Yoganandaji and by his guru, Sri Yukteswarji, who was guided by Babaji to compare the two scriptures to show the same underlying truths between them. This week it's called Many Are the Pathways to Truth. Truth is one and eternal. Realize oneness with it in your deathless self within. The following commentary is based on the teachings of Paramahansa Yogananda. On the dedication page of Swami Kriyananda's book, The Path, which is now called The New Path, appears the following account. A group of Paramahansa Yogananda's disciples had gone with him to see a movie about the life of Gyandev, a great saint in medieval India. Afterwards, they gathered and listened to the master explain certain subtler aspects of that inspiring story. A young man in the group mentioned after the film he had seen years earlier in India about the life of Mirabai, a famous woman saint. "If you'd seen that movie," he exclaimed, "you wouldn't even have liked this one." The guru rebuked him. "Why make such comparisons? The lives of great saints manifest in various ways the same, one God. The Bible contains a similar account in the Gospel of St. Luke. And John said, Master, we saw one casting out devils in thy name, and we forbade him, because he followeth not with us. And Jesus said unto him, Forbid him not, for he that is not against us is for us. The more central a truth, the greater the numbers of contexts in which it can be applied. Truth is like a pure white light, containing within it the full spectrum of the rainbow. Let no one tell you what your path to God ought to be. Many are the paths. Select your own according to the dictates of your own nature, no matter how out of step that puts you with other people. Sri Krishna in the 3rd chapter of the Bhagavad Gita states, trying even unsuccessfully to fill one's own spiritual duty or dharma is better than pursuing successfully the duties of others. Better death itself in the pursuance of one's own duties. The pursuance of another's duties is fraught with spiritual danger. Thus, through Holy Scripture, God has spoken to mankind. Om, Om, Om.
This reading is from... Sorry, my watch is misbehaving. This reading is from Whispers from Eternity by Paramahansa Yogananda, Book of Prayer Poems. This one is entitled, Save Me from Wrong Beliefs. I am lost, Father, in the wastelands of wrong beliefs. Where is my home? I have kept the doors of my soul always open, expecting Thee. Ah, I have not yet found Thee. Rise high in the sky to illuminate my darkness. Be the pole star to my searching mind, directing me to Thyself. For therein, I know, lies my home. This is such an important topic, and so important for us on the spiritual path at the beginning and then going forward. In the beginning, it's very necessary because when we are following something, for example, like this path, that isn't necessarily, widely embraced, and often we're coming to this path from another path or another religion generally, sometimes we can meet with resistance. That In America, it's easy to understand the resistance on one level because the prevailing religions, you could say, don't necessarily match with what people are studying here. It's changing nowadays. There's much more awareness of yoga and meditation, so it's not as much of an issue now. And here too, though, just recently someone was saying that my parents are upset because I'm taking a break from rituals. He said, I want to understand these from inside, and I want to connect with God inside, and I find the rituals for the ritual's sake are not moving me. They're not enough for me. And so he wasn't rejecting them, but he was just saying, I don't want to do them right now. And of course, his parents took that as a rejection of everything. And I shouldn't say of course, but meaning because they were upset. Why were they upset? It was because, of course, they took it as a rejection. In fact, he was wanting to understand it more deeply. His resistance was actually from a place of sincerity, wanting to know deeper truths. Respect. I had another friend who went through this situation. She didn't want to do the rituals in her religion, the shraddam, basically memory of the departed in a different religion. And her parents would call her constantly saying, have you lit the lamp for grandma and so on. And she was in college at the time, living away, and she would sort of hedge her answer to the point where they sensed something fishy was going on. And when she told me about it, she said, I don't want to do something that so many people have respect for, and I don't even understand. I don't even know why we do these things, and I feel it's sort of insincere and, again, disrespectful for me to just go through some motions when I don't really appreciate them and again, understand them. And I said, don't you see, your parents think you're disrespecting the ritual and your grandmother when in fact you are having even greater respect. And someone says, sure, this, and just does it thoughtlessly as long as they can check that or tick that box. And so I said, you've got to tell. Her dad visited town, and I said, you've got to tell him. And so with some trepidation over dinner, she told him, and he cried. He said, I'm so touched that you feel this way, and you're asking questions about our religion that I didn't ask until I was 50 years old, and it was a great healing between them. But don't be surprised if people see what you're doing, in this case, this other friend, as a rejection, because they may not understand there could be another interpretation. We've talked about this a lot, that Rajasic energy comes out of Tamasic energy, so to speak. In other words, we sort of start out Tamasic and then we get moving. And so we go from a place of stillness, very still, to a place of movement, and then we start to realize that when I do too much of that, I have to come back to my center and recharge. And suddenly we want to sit and meditate, which is also still. If you see somebody sitting, you don't know if they're meditating or sleeping, unless they're in this asana. You don't necessarily know. In other words, in some ways, Sattva guna and Tamaguna look similar. But of course they're not at all, and they're worlds apart. But if a Rajasic person, which has happened to me a lot when I was coming on the path, they say, why you want to be still? Why you don't want to do anything? You've got to be active. You've got to be moving all the time. And I didn't have enough awareness at the time to have answers for it. I just knew what I felt. I knew what I wanted. And people who were debating with me were very smart. And so it wasn't easy to just, come up with answers to their challenges. But Swamiji explained that, of course, if you've come from tamasic energy to rajasic energy, and then you see someone being still, you assume it's tamasic, because that's all you know. That's all you've seen before. So it's natural that people would make that assumption that by being still, you're lowering your energy, when in fact you're raising your energy, quite literally up the spine. But if that's outside their experience or their interest, then what else are they going to think? In other words, why get excited if somebody is that way? Try to find an answer they can relate to. That I find it helps me with stress, like the stress of this incarnation and multiple incarnations, and I want to merge in God. You can say that all as a footnote. But find an answer that they can relate to. Why? Because we don't have to win their opinion. We don't have to win their approval. It's nice if we can. One friend of ours was coming here for prayers. I gave away the punchline. Here for meditation when she lived far away. And her uncle said, "Why do you go all the way there for yoga? There is yoga just here. You can go there and be back and give me tea." And she said, no, I go to that place because it helps me. And he said, "But why travel so far?" She said, "I do prayers there. I do prayers for you also." "Oh, well, please go." Because then he gets all the benefit of the prayers without having to pray. And so again, find an answer that makes sense. Find when in a disagreement, especially within your close circle, try to find things that are in common, that you have in common. It may not be that you have everything in common, and the things that are most precious to you, you may not have in common there. You may have in common here. So I'm not saying, I am saying find your own family, find your own friends. We had a gathering of friends recently, and a number of them were just kind of going, because they had been living in a different environment, working in a different environment. And they said, "Oh, what a relief it is to just be among yogis, to be among my guru bhais, to be among people who are not sort of constantly criticizing me mentally and so on." We have to remind ourselves what that feels like sometimes. I would say once a week at least. And so that's part of why the satsang, for example, is so refreshing. It's the vibration, not only of the temple, but of everyone coming together, those of like mind. But we also see, this is one thing this reading speaks to, is don't let anyone say, "This is my belief and it must be yours too." That's not necessary. And "This is my opinion and you must share it." The only thing that matters is truth. Swamiji said once in a meeting with others they were having a argument about something, people outside of Ananda but who live nearby, neighbors. He had them over for dinner and said, "Listen, why don't we see what we can agree on?" And they kept, saying they were concerned about this and this that was going to happen if Ananda did certain things which had nothing to do with them and wouldn't have had that impact. And Swamiji said, "Listen, I'm not interested in opinions." And they, "What?" And he said, "I'm not even interested in my own opinion." He said, "I'm only interested in truth. And you have to trust me. If we saw anything we were doing was harming you, we would stop immediately." But they just couldn't accept that. And then one man complained that we're trying to fight against your cause, and then we have this other cause with the miners that is also taking our energy, and we're not allowed to put enough energy into this battle. And Swamiji said, "Well, then I hope you have, 10 or 25 more causes that you have to fight as well." And the man said, "Now, I don't like to hear you talk that way." And Swamiji said, "I'm just kidding." But again, it was hard. He was trying to elevate it to the level of, look, sort of the Pandavas and Kauravas after the day's battle having dinner together kind of thing. Let's just, just talk about it as people, as human beings. It was hard for them. But we shouldn't worry about opinions. Again, even our own. We should care about what is true. That's what makes you a devotee. Devoted to truth. You care what's true. Some people don't. And I'm not criticizing. I'm just saying, if we say, "But that may or may not be true," a friend of mine said that to me. She said, "I don't care if it's true. It's what I want." And I thought, well, I guess that's the end of that conversation, because then we had no sort of common thread to agree on. Whereas another friend of mine, our friendship was sort of solidified when we were having a debate, and as soon as the person saw, through logic or evidence, that their point was wrong, they said, "Oh, I see, never mind. No, you're right. That thing is right." Because that had never happened in my life. It was always just, "No, I can speak loudly, and therefore it proves my point." It doesn't prove anything. In mathematics, we would even call it that when you're trying to prove something mathematically, there's this sort of encouragement to believe what I'm saying, and we called it proof by hand waving. That regardless of any facts, if I can wave my hands enough, it must be true and you must believe it. And you see that a lot among people, and it's okay. In other words, we're not trying to point out wrong behavior. We're just saying follow your own path. Do what you think is right. And then when talking to someone, don't shove the path down their throat either. Because that's just the same as when they're shoving it to us. If they say, I don't approve, I don't agree, you can sort of say, well, why don't we eat something? We can agree on that. And that's actually a good example. I mean, when you're in a restaurant, you have your order and you eat it, and the person next to you is eating their thing, and you're having ghee roast dosa, masala dosa, and they're having pavakai soup. But they're loving it, and so you're happy for them. And they're not coming over and dumping the soup on you and saying, you must eat the pavakai. And neither are they trying to take away your dosa. They might actually want to, but it's just everybody has their own meal. And it's perfectly fine. And we accept that everyone has a right to their tastes. Again, even in choosing a spiritual path, see what suits your nature, as the reading said. That's very important. That helps you to know your own, it helps to know your own nature. And when you try different paths, it also helps you see what you connect with. If that's a phase that you, or a stage that you go through, not everybody does. Some people do that their whole life, and that's a valid way to God too. But when we, as the reading said, when you choose your own, choose it according to your preference. You're the one who has to follow it. It doesn't help anyone to list on their resume, my son did this, when the son is the one having to deal with all of that, whatever it is. You see, we have to live our own lives. It's the only way we'll find peace. And most people who challenge you, if they really do love you, they will appreciate in the end that you're doing what makes you happy. A friend of ours who was on the path for many years, her mother said to her, you are the only one who did something completely out of the mainstream, whereas all the other, there were many children, many cousins of that generation. She said all the other children followed basically what they were told or what was presented to them, but perhaps not sincerely, meaning they may not have fully felt that they wanted to, but they did. And she said, all these decades later, I see you're the only one who's happy. And so remember, when somebody says, this will happen, that will happen, the story isn't over yet. Let the years go by. Let them prove out whether your choices are real. And we have to always be open to maybe God wants something else for us. Not necessarily a different path, maybe, but that's not common. But Swamiji was put that challenge by some people. They were Christians and they were following Kriya Yoga and Master. And they said, but we believe that if we're practicing Kriya Yoga and we had a vision of Jesus and he told us not to do it, then we would not do it. And Swamiji said, well, if I was doing Kriya Yoga and I had a vision of Jesus and he said not to do it, I wouldn't do it. So would I. I would also drop it. If it's coming from God, that's the truth. That's the point. That didn't happen, but the point is we should always be open to God, remembering He's the goal, and following what He's saying. There's a lot of other sort of vistas, like what's a true vision and all that, but I'm going to leave that for now. But even on the path, we have to understand that there are different ways, different personalities, different temperaments. One man who was a disciple of Babaji, and he felt that he had met Babaji in the flesh, and there was a man for some years kind of putting forward that he was Mahavatar Babaji, and Swamiji was fairly confident that this man was not Babaji for various reasons. And his disciple came to him and said, I want to show a video about this Babaji here. The man was in India, but this happened at Ananda village. He said, I want to, give a satsang where everybody can learn about what Babaji's up to these days. And Swamiji said, I don't feel that would, basically be appropriate. And as he said, he felt confident that this was not even true. But then the man pushed it and said, no, you have to. And he said, well, if this is Babaji, then he's going to have to tell me that he's Babaji. And the man said, he's telling you through me. And Swamiji said, well, he's going to have to find another way. And he said, and being an avatar, I don't doubt that he can if he wants to. But Swamiji said later to a group, he said, I didn't say anything against what he believed. I feel it's a sin to undermine someone else's faith in what they're doing. I mean, if what they're doing is dangerous and they ask you your opinion, then maybe. But generally, we don't want to ever cut down or break anyone's self-confidence or their passion or their faith in what they're doing. If it's working for them, fine. It doesn't mean it would work for us. It doesn't mean we have to accept it personally. That's the difference. People find it as a personal challenge that maybe I have to do what you're doing. Many people may challenge you because they say, if you meditate, it reminds me that I should meditate, but I don't want to meditate, so could you please also stop? And just say, it's okay. I do prayers for you after the meditation. Just let it be, and don't be excited if people approach you that way. I remember one person in the middle of an argument with me said, "Don't try to change me." And I thought, my God, the only thing I'm trying to change is to get you to shut up. I wasn't at all wanting you to change your beliefs the way whatever you're doing is fine. But he was feeling, probably inwardly, a challenge. Because if I was choosing one thing over, in this case, materialism, and he was a devoted disciple of materialism, that he became a little uneasy. How can you reject this thing that I hold so dear? And I was just saying, no, I'm just not interested myself, but it was too much. So again, don't be surprised. But again, even on the spiritual path, even among disciples, brother, sister disciples at Ananda, you will find different approaches to the same truth. And as Dharmini was saying to a group of friends recently, you may find someone here that you connect with immediately and you're just friends, and that's wonderful. You may find somebody here that you don't connect with on a personality level, and then just be glad that you're all Guru Bhais. That's very helpful because we see on the spiritual path people come from all different places, all different ages, and we often meet people on the path and get to speak with them freely, people that we might never meet otherwise. In our sort of social circle or family circle, we don't come across, different kinds of people perhaps, and we do here in the temple. And it's so lovely that way to feel that kinship, that connection, realizing that it goes beyond any superficial differences. But there's this one thing in common, loving God, wanting God, feeling that the way to find God is through meditation, through right living, through kindness also. That's a part of the culture at Ananda too. Swamiji said he would like that to be his legacy to all of us and to all people, kindness. And so I remember I was in a class once and the teacher at Ananda was explaining a certain struggle that Ananda was having at that time. And there was one issue in particular, and she said, everything's fine, there's no sort of problem. And I said, well, but this one issue, which was important to me, is a problem. And she said, oh, well, that's not a problem. And so I bit my tongue. But later, I said to Nayaswami Vidura, I said, basically, what's happening? Because she told this whole group of people that this issue isn't important. But I think it's very important. I didn't even say to me. I mean, just it's the truth that it's very important. And he said, Dharmarajan, at Ananda, everybody picks it up by their own string. And it immediately helped me to relax. That was her focus. And he explained why she might have said that, because there were other issues that were much more severe that had gotten resolved, and she was perhaps enjoying the resolution of those, and this other thing, look, compared to what was at stake, this is not a big issue. And I have always sort of applied that going forward, that look, people are picking it up by their own string. They have that right. And if they have an opinion different to your opinion, it's only truth that matters. So just allow for the differences, and also allow for people to not allow for the differences. Someone said to Swamiji, she had a weird way of interviewing him. She would basically say, what do you think about abuse? Like what? You mean for or against? I mean, he said, abuse is terrible. And then so she would go on in different ways. She said, what about, what was the word? Intolerance. People can be so intolerant these days, intolerant of religion, intolerant of people who are different from them, intolerant. He said, well, of course we must be tolerant. She said, but people aren't. They're intolerant. He said, we should be tolerant even of intolerance. And for the first time she paused, trying to compute that one perhaps. So be patient with others. Try to understand where they're coming from. That's one thing that helps us in these disagreements. Try to see it from their point of view without, you could say, enlarge your point of view to include their point of view without giving up your point of view. And again, most people either in the end will be happy that you're happy, or they will just get tired and find some other way to amuse themselves.
This reading, good morning, everyone.